Merci et bonjour. Thank you. Again, my name is Craig Macdonald. I'm the lead partner for Accenture on the Verizon account. And I've been working with Verizon for the last year, helping them with a project that's called Precision Market Insights. And I'm going to explain today what that project was, where we are in the process, how we built that, what SAS's role was in that build-out. And I want to step back. The project started 3 years ago with a simple question. Verizon came to Accenture and had the question, why is it that Google is pulling a meg of data off of our network for every cell phone every day? What are they getting? What are they doing with that data? Verizon just fundamentally didn't know. And we did some projects to look at what that data was, and Google was essentially downloading data from the Android device that was running on the wireless phones and grabbing location information, usage information about the applications, and about the browser searches and about the searches that people were doing on their phones, and using that information, obviously, to power their business. And Verizon said, we need to do the same thing. What is our data worth? How do we create a business out of this data? Mobile advertising, which is what Google uses that data for, is right now about an $8 billion business globally. Every analyst projection I've seen suggests it's going to be about $30, $40 billion by the end of the decade. And unless something changes, every last dollar of that's going to go to Google because they're in the perfect position to take advantage of the data that's available in that business right now. And Verizon said, we want some of that opportunity. And Verizon's not the only one. I'm going to talk about the Verizon case study in detail. However, there are a ton of companies out there right now, globally, that are trying to figure out what's our data worth and how do we monetize our data. Here's a couple of examples. I can't think of a telecommunications company that Accenture, probably many of you see out there right now, that isn't talking about how they take their data and make some money out of it. But they're not the only ones. Twitter, 3 weeks ago, announced a partnership with Nielsen in the United States where they're going to start selling their data to help drive advertising rates on TV publishers and TV programs in the United States. Tesco in the UK for about 8-9 years now has been, through their subsidiary dunnhumby, taking the data that they generate from their affinity card programs and selling that to their manufacturing partners in their supply chain to help with inventory and working capital management. I used to personally run the program at Citibank that uses data from people's credit card transactions to profile them and sell the information on consumer behaviors to airlines, clothing manufacturers, all sorts of retail organizations as a data monetization opportunity. A very interesting program that just started in the last year is the Système Transit de Montréal, the metro system in Montreal, where they're using their app that they have on the phones that people use to scan for entering and exiting the metro system in Montreal to put specific promotions to people about activities that take place from the stations that they use, which they see through the phones. And last is MasterCard. MasterCard has had a global program for a long time now called MasterCard Advisors, where they take all the transaction they gather about people's credit and debit card purchases, selling that to retailers to help them with retail analytics. So this is taking place in all verticals. We've seen it across governments, financial services companies, across the board. But in telecommunications, and particularly in wireless carriers, is where it's been the most developed. And Verizon's been out on the lead in this. So I've been working with Verizon, like I said, for the last year. And let me give you an overview of the Verizon program. Started 2.5 years ago. And the first thing we had to answer is, what data does Verizon have from their systems that is of value, and what is that value to other organizations? They basically have 3 classes of data that's of value. The first, they have a billing relationship with 100 million subscribers in the United States. They have about 100 million cell phone wireless users, and they have a billing relationship so they know who that person is. The second piece of information that they have, which is of value, is they know geolocation. From any initiation of the cell phone, they're able to figure out where that person is from their cell phone usage. We did all the analytics at Accenture using SAS technology to build out the way to take a network call and take all the network data and transform that data back into a specific latitude and longitude geolocation fix of a person's phone at any time. And we can then use that information to segment those 100 million subscribers into new groups that were never possible before. When do people travel? How far do they travel? How often do they travel? What times of day? Which days of the week? And you can put people into profiles that are very, very, very powerful. The third piece of information that they have is they have information about what you actually do with your phone, what apps you download, what searches you conduct, what browser activities you execute. And they can look at my phone, for example, and see that I download Yahoo Finance and the New York Times and a number of different media publications that are common in the United States. And they can put me into a category. I like news, or I like sports, or I like whatever. So those are the three pieces of data that they had. Then we looked and we said, how do we identify the use cases for this data? Those use cases fell into three broad categories. One-to-one marketing opportunities, where we can actually use that proximity or geolocation data to figure out where people are and do one-to-one marketing to them. Now there's a big, big caveat to that. One, the system has to work in real time, and second, the consumer has to opt in. They have to give you permission to actually do that proactive push to them for marketing purposes. And I'll come back to that in a second. The second area of opportunity is in measurement systems. That's what we call the measurement systems, where we take the data, and we don't need opt-in for this, but we can aggregate the data together and measure things out in the market. Who is going to a retail store? Oops, sorry. Who is seeing particular advertisements, particularly out-of-home advertisements? Who is visiting various venues? There's all sorts of applications for that data to help marketers, advertisers better understand where the audiences are that they're trying to attract, and do so in an aggregated way that does not require opt-in. And then there's another bucket of other types of applications, which I'm not going to actually talk about today. Let me talk about the one-to-one marketing operation first. Take a Starbucks or any sort of retail location, a Carrefour or an organization like that. Understanding when somebody is proximate to that location and then using either the text messaging system or an SMS push to push a promotion out to them. That's essentially that case, and it requires opt-in. That is not live with Verizon yet for a couple of very good reasons. One, getting the infrastructure to do that in real time, because if somebody's proximate to location, you need to be able to push to them a real-time offer. And they have to also be willing to accept that offer, which requires opt-in. I'll make a comment on opt-in because this is a very, very difficult problem for any sort of marketer, any sort of retailer. Up until about 6 months ago, and I can't reveal the specific numbers because they're proprietary, but I'll just give you a gross sense of scale. Verizon had far, far, far less than 1% of their base opted in. It was basically so small as to make the use case not useful. That's why there's no one-to-one marketing opportunities that are being launched through the Verizon Precision product yet today. It's coming down the road. I can't say when because that's proprietary, but it's coming down the road. But they just started working on opt-in at Verizon. And the way they got it done is they created a partnership with the National Football League, which is the big sports league in the United States, where they partnered as part of their overall omnibus partnership with the NFL. One of the aspects of that deal was that they are able to actually do push advertising through an application that you can download on your phone to track National Football League games in the United States. That is the most popularly downloaded app in the history of any app that's been launched in the United States. And as a result of that, it comes embedded with inherent opt-in. And so Verizon's gone from far less than 1% to a very significant part of their base now being opted in. And that is actually a very clear case. All companies out there struggle with how do we actually create the value proposition that gets our clients to opt in. That is a clear case of how to get the job done. And they've been able to, in 6 months, completely change their opportunity when it comes to that particular use case. And now they're starting to really prioritize within their roadmap for precision how they're going to be doing one-to-one marketing. As a result of that, though, the products that have been in the market for Verizon over the course of the last year, since this product has been launched, have largely been in that second category. How can we use the data to actually do some level of what we call measurement-related use cases? Those tend to fall into a couple of classes. Can we use this data to help out-of-home advertisers, so people who are buying billboards, people who are buying venue advertising, can we help them identify where the audiences that they're trying to target actually are? Can we use the data as well to do retail and site analytics? And can we use the data to do other types of enterprise class analytics? I'll give you two examples. The first is for retail analytics. Accenture helped out in these projects quite a bit. I was the lead partner on brokering a lot of these conversations. Verizon fundamentally doesn't know how to do enterprise sales. I'm not speaking badly of them, it's not their business. And that's why they came to us, is to help them out with that, because that is our business. And what we were trying to do is help them understand, well, what are the use cases for what people would ultimately want to do with this type of information. There was I'll give you an example. There were two broad categories of how that information was being used. The first was retailers. We did a project in the United States with Walmart. Walmart's a big retailer, the biggest retailer in the country. And they have a problem. 40% of the people who come to their stores use cash. They don't use affinity cards. They don't use any sort of way that Walmart can actually identify who they are or how they actually pay. They just pay with cash. And for them, it's a big merchandising problem, because if you don't know who your clients are, and you don't know who they are store by store, it's difficult to predict your supply chain. It's difficult to predict your merchandising strategy, and it's difficult to predict what your inventory levels should be. So what they wanted to do is understand, well, who is it that's actually coming to our stores? Well, we can figure that out. As the cell phone walks into the store, it has a billing relationship with the owner of the phone, and though we can't identify the owner of the phone, me, they do know that I'm of a certain age, I'm of a certain income, I have a certain set of behaviors based off of my phone, and they can get a lot of information about me. But they can also figure out who's going to the store next door, and how much of the traffic I'm getting is also going to a store that I compete with in the area. And is there any insight that I can gain from that would allow me to change my merchandising strategy, change the way I think about my business, and get more traffic in? For this 40% of the largest retailer in the country, 40% of their clients were previously unidentified. Well, no longer. Now they're identified, at least at an aggregate level. The second use case we have been developing for using the precision data is around beverage companies. One of the large beverage companies in the United States, they make sodas, colas, et cetera. They have about 50 different products. Their second largest distribution channel are convenience stores, very small stores. They sell in the United States through about 300,000 of these smaller stores. They sell through 40,000 large retailers like Walmart's, big grocery store chains, et cetera, and they have fantastic information about those big stores. That information comes from Nielsen. And they pay about $1 million, $2 million, maybe even up to 3 million euros a year to procure that information so they can do analytics on what's happening at the big box retailers. But they have no information whatsoever about their second most important distribution chain, convenience stores. Well, again, now they do. With the information from Precision, you can identify for those 300,000 convenience stores who's walking into them, what's their ethnic persuasion, how often do they come, are they weekend travelers? And the beverage companies are using this information to understand, well, should we be changing our packaging size? If we see that the primary traffickers to a convenience store are commuters who travel more than 40 or 50 kilometers a day, should we then be downsizing the packaging size? Should we be changing the location of our merchandising strategy in those stores to be closer to the coffee, which is where people go in the morning when they stop at a convenience store? Where should we be doing this? So we can boost the profitability and be even more micro-targeted when it comes to our strategy around promotions and merchandising at the convenience store level. It's changing the way they think about the entire problem. The second use case is around, I said before, there was a big push to build out a use case around out-of-home measurement. I've been a marketer for a very long time. I've been CMO of a number of different companies. And when you go out and buy out-of-home advertising, billboards, sponsorships, venues, there's essentially no good way to do targeting. If my product is targeted towards women 25 to 35 who make between 100 and 150 euros a year, there's no way I could figure out which billboards, which out-of-home advertising venues to go and buy. Well, now that's different. Again, I can see, based off of the data from the Precision data set, where those people are. What are the top 100, 200 pieces of real estate across the country where if I want to get that audience, where are they? When are they there? How do I do it? It's essentially making the buying of out-of-home advertising the same as digital advertising. When you do digital advertising buys, it's always called audience buying. You go to a publisher online, you say, well, I want to go and buy an audience of women 25 to 45, and it's very easy in digital. It was impossible and out of home. Now it's possible. And now it's something that's being exploited by a number of the retailers in the United States. And this is an example of the type of data from another use case that we have. One of the retailers wanted us to do an analysis of a market in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, about where they could find beauty and wellness fans who were their target audience. And again, we put together a profile of the specific locations across the city and across the region where you could find them in the morning, where the brands that they co-located, what apps they would download to their phone, what were the typical things that you would see this audience that you're targeting ultimately doing, and then how can I use that to make my own marketing and targeting programs much more precise. There's an old saying in marketing, which is that marketing is an exercise in how much wastage you're willing to tolerate, and that's the whole goal, is getting rid of that, making marketing highly, highly effective. The big challenge we've always had with Verizon in particular and with data monetization projects in general is figuring out where to kind of play in what we call the data valuation stack. At the bottom you have raw data, at the top you have an entire solution that manages the entire transaction. And I would say that one of the key things that we have learned throughout the project that we've been doing with Verizon is exactly this. Where should we play in the stack? Where should any company that's trying to build out a data monetization play? And because there's so many use cases for this type of data, from these measurement opportunities, of which I've just touched a few of them, to the one-to-one marketing opportunities, the question is always, should we just be a raw data or process data provider to the market and let other organizations out there take that data and actually distribute it, make it valuable and build the entire solution? Or should we build the entire solution? Verizon's come to a couple of conclusions based off of the particular use cases. In situations like out-of-home advertising, they made the decision that they just want to be a data provider. In situations like one-to-one marketing, where they're doing that one-to-one marketing push through the SMS system or through the text messaging system, they've decided that they want to go into, I'll say competition, but at least build the entire solution stack like Google is doing and would, so that they can capture all of the value. And there's a trade-off in this continuum. If you play at the bottom of the stack, there's less risk, because all you have to do is get your data in shape and provide it as a service to the market. But there's also less reward. People are willing to pay less just for the raw and processed data. If you decide to build out the entire solution, it's a harder problem. You have to build out the go-to-market strategy. You have to build out a complete solution. It's probably in an area that's not necessarily the core competency of the organization, but the rewards are much higher, sometimes significantly higher. Let me talk for a second about the role SAS played in this and about the role of the modeling work that we specifically had to do, because the modeling work that had to be done here was extensive. There were really three major modeling problems that we had to go through, and we used SAS throughout the entire process to do all the modeling work. Accenture was essentially subcontracted out by Verizon to do the analytics work, the app development, and the go-to-market strategy. And we worked very closely with the Verizon team over the course of the last 2 years to do all of this. But the analytics work, like I said, there was three key things we had to do. First was the geolocation fix. The methodology that we used was what we called a data triangulation process, not dissimilar to what you would think of from sonar. So if I initiate a call on my phone, there's a wave that's going out and it's hitting wireless cell towers. All we need is it to hit 3 wireless cell towers, and there's an identifier of that transaction in the network data from the carrier, from this case from Verizon. And when we see that hit 3 cell towers, we know the location, the latitude and longitude of those 3 cell towers. We can triangulate back from those, based off the time differentials of when they hit each of the towers, what the latitude and longitude is of the phone at the time of that cell initiation, within about 50 meters right now. Why not more precise? Depends on how many significant digits you capture from the timestamp, because the more significant digits and the accuracy of those significant digits allows you to get more and more and more precise. And this was a big issue that we had is, can we get the precision necessary to get that geolocation fix more and more precise? Because sometimes 50 meters is fine, sometimes it's not. It essentially allows us to figure out if somebody's around a store or a geolocation, not necessarily inside the store. The second major problem that we had was what we called extrapolation. how do we take this, the second problem we had was then how do we take that geolocation fix of the individual cell phone and associate it with some physical property in the world that is of importance? So for example, I want to know, are the people in this room here at CNIT in La Défense, right? Well, I have to know the latitude and longitude of this particular building. And you have to have that latitude and longitude for essentially all points of interest that are of interest to the clients across the entire country. Well, that's an endless list. And there's a bunch of, there's nobody who really had that compendium. But when we engage in a project, you have to go to the client and basically say, what are the latitude and longitude of your stores, the locations about which you want to actually do marketing? That's clearly a big job. We partnered with a number of companies, in particular companies called AirSage and Newfield Technologies in the US to get that data, and they've been very helpful in getting that to data. Then we use SAS to essentially do the modeling to figure out, well, tell me when the cell phone is within a certain radius of these points of interest that are supplied by these third parties so that we can then trigger an alert or trigger an identity that this person has then been exposed to that position. The third major problem that we had was then, how do we take the subscriber base? And even though Verizon has 100 million subscribers, it's not the entire population of the United States. The United States has 300 million people in it. And marketers in particular don't care about national demographics. They care about demographics down to what's called the DMA or essentially a city level, a zip code level. They want to see it down to that level. So we had to build out a very extensive model, again, using SAS to do all the associations that would show us for the number of cell phone subscribers we had in a particular location, how do we then extrapolate that out to the population so that Verizon's sample is representative of the entire sample at the DMA level for 800 million subscribers across the entire country. And then extrapolate as well their mobile signature. So first point, we used Experian to do a bunch of the pens that we would understand age, demographics, income, because then we compared those fields to the information that comes from the census, and we did all the projections based off the Experian data appended to the subscriber base at Verizon. The second thing we did is we also had to translate people's mobile behavior into concepts that mobile advertisers find appealing. The same thing we had to do is, again, a very extensive modeling project, in this case using data from BlueKai, which is a database marketing provider in the United States. I think they exist in Europe as well, where they created a bunch of segments for people's mobile and digital behaviors. And we used their data set as essentially a representation of the population. And we took the Verizon data set and extrapolated it and connected it to the BlueKai data so that there was seamlessness between the way mobile marketers use BlueKai to target audiences and the way marketers used the census and common demographics to target audiences when it came to the physical world. And SAS was part and parcel in that. This is an example of the architecture that was used. At the bottom, the data is coming from Verizon. So we're getting all the subscriber data, all the network data. We're then appending it through a series of analytic processes that SAS powers with Experian, BlueKai, doing all these extrapolations, doing all the geolocation matching processes, and then loading it into an application that allows us to then visualize and query the data. The last point, I'll make one last point. Actually, I'm going to skip this. We're getting to the point now where, with the Verizon case, they've launched the product, they're out in the market, they've been doing very well. They're switching now over, because of the success of their app with the NFL, into doing one-on-one marketing cases, extending their current position and doing just measurement-related products into doing one-to-one marketing. We're seeing other organizations out there wanting to do the same thing. The big challenge is how to get started. We've actually seen a number of other telecommunications companies across the board in Canada and Telecom New Zealand, here in Europe, and starting with very, very focused projects. How do we assess our market opportunity, assess our data, get out into the market quickly with an agile product that allows us to very quickly get feedback from our customer base and then expand and understand where we can invest and what we need to invest to have a data monetization strategy. That's been working very well. The key thing we have seen that is working is agility. And that's something I would say, if there's a lesson learned from Verizon, it was that when we first started out, I don't think they recognized how agile you need to be to compete in a fast-moving market like mobile advertising. And that's something that I think we're seeing all the telecommunication, financial services companies that we've been working with working on now, which is how do we get something out fast? Let's not try to guess what the market wants. Let's do what Google does. Let's do what Facebook does. Let's do what the cutting edge companies out there do, which is get things out in front of the client, listen well, iterate quickly, and continue to develop. So thank you very much. Here's my contact information if you need, and that's what we've been doing at Verizon.